from writer-director Rian Johnson.
The Holy Grail. A perfectly impossible crime.
Wake Up Dead Man has critics singing its praises.
God help me. Anything else?
It's a deliciously entertaining mystery.
That's nice.
It's certified fresh.
It's a miracle.
Okay, you're freaking me out now.
It's the best Knives Out movie yet.
This case is solvable, right?
Oh, you'll see. It's fun.
Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery starring Daniel Craig. Now played in select theaters on Netflix December 12th, rated PG-13.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Paterson here, your host on The Left versus the Right. And I'm sitting in this room looking for James Flippin. He's supposed to be my co-host. Everyone knows I have a serious visual problem, so he must really be here. Are you here, James?
Yeah, Governor, it's okay. I understand, like you've been very open and honest about. We've known it for many years. There are some visual deficiencies there, but don't worry, I'm here. You can hear me, right? Obviously.
Yes, of course.
The visual side is not as relevant on the radio, so we don't worry about that.
You must be sitting right across the table and I'm missing it. But actually, James is on location right now covering another story for WABC. But he has taken the time out to do the left versus the right with me. James, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, great Thanksgiving, Governor. Hopefully you did as well. I know we had a chance to kind of catch up a little bit on
because we saw each other
Friday.
On the morning show at about 5:45 the next day on Friday.
Yes. We were still kind of coming out of the turkey coma at that point, but no, feeling very good, feeling very thankful, excited for the month of December and the closeout of 2025. Not to mention that my Christmas tree is now in my living room. So I'm officially into the holiday season at Casa Flip.
All right. That's pretty good. Now, I had a great evening after Thanksgiving last night. As you know, it was my wife's birthday and we had all the family members around. We had a really good time. So here I am Saturday afternoon. I should be feeling up, but I'm not. I can't get over the vicious attack on those two Army recruits in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. And, of course, the woman who was there passed away Thursday night. President Trump made that announcement. Andrew Wolf, the survivor, is still in critical condition. And it just makes my stomach turn thinking about this, thinking about how some human being who lived a long way away from here worked it out so he could get here and has 5 children, and this is his idea of retribution.
Well, Governor Paterson, I obviously share in that feeling, the heartbreak, the confusion, the sort of pain that comes with that situation, and just the kind of enduring feeling that the nation's sort of under attack on some level, right? The core principles of the United States of America, and we're celebrating the 250th anniversary coming up next year. And, this is the idea of sending National Guard members into U.S. cities to try to crack down on crime and improve the quality of life.
Jump in just for a second, James. The woman was 20 years old, and her first name is Sarah. Her last name was?
Beckstrom.
Of all of the police shootings, and you hear about police officers, male and female, being killed and that kind of thing, I can't think of someone who was in law enforcement being gunned down at any age younger than what happened to her the other day.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I think that's one of the especially tragic aspects of the use of the National Guard in this context, right? Now, we've heard from a lot of people on the left, Governor Paterson, who have said, oh, well, this is what happens when people see military uniforms in the streets, and And what do you expect? And this is a pushback against that authoritarianism and whatever. And of course, people in the tri-state area say, well, since 2001, we've seen National Guard members in transit hubs and at airports and Penn Station, train stations, whatever. We didn't certainly feel the need or desire to launch into some sort of internal revolution. But the idea of it being a 20-year-old woman who had her whole life ahead of her, was in the National Guard, so it doesn't necessarily mean that she was going to try to make a career out of the military, but wanted to gain some skills, give back to the country, make a sacrifice. If I'm not mistaken, she was actually standing on this post because one of her friends needed the day off, or who knows.
She was filling in for a colleague.
Yeah, so that's like especially just one of those awful, sliding doors moments, so to speak. But yeah, 20 years old. And I think that, to your point, Governor Paterson, a lot of the time when it's cops, not that it makes it any better, but it's someone who's maybe having come out of college or was, in their mid-20s or late 20s. Again, just to reiterate the point, not that that's so much better, but this is someone who in many ways was hardly even a part of society yet.
Right.
And they get cut down because of this whole concept of Allahu Akbar, Intifada. I'm so angry at the West that I'm just going to kill these two people in cold blood. Or obviously, God pray and God hope that it's only the one death that resulted, but that remains to be seen.
Well, James, as I think about this notion that you referred to, that people think that if you put more forces, police, National Guard, whatever, on the streets, that it incites people to commit violent felonies. It makes absolutely no sense. And one of the things I wanted to add is we've had, as you pointed out, plenty of protests in New York City where there were a lot of law enforcement people there because there were different kinds of threats against the people who were organizing, or threats that the protesters themselves might get out of hand. And most of the time, in fact, almost all the time, things go very smoothly. And so that is not a legitimate argument against what happened and how this poor young woman got killed. And I'm sure her family would be thrilled to hear that kind of criticism of the government after what they have lost in the past few days.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. The whole idea that there's some sort of justification because a 29-year-old Afghanistan man who was part of the war against the Taliban and then several years ago comes here and all of a sudden he's going to launch a pistol attack against these two National Guard members. That's not some American who's rising up against the structure here. And as much as I could take issue with a lot of the, say, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel disruptions in New York City over the last few years, aside from the sort of George Floyd chaos and the summer of 2020, most of the time, yeah, you're right. These protesters, and I use that term a little bit loosely because if you want to go back to Southern California earlier this year, it really did devolve into riot-like conditions. But most of the time, we understand when you come together and when you rise up in protest, it's something that's part of your constitutionally protected rights. But these two young National Guard members being attacked, it is seditious. It is aimed at upheaval. It aimed at changing society. And, our owner-operator, Governor Paterson, as you know, John Catsimatidis, suggested in the last few days, maybe we need to follow the money here. Is this some sort of one of these rabble-rousers wanting to pay this guy to continue to sow the seeds of discourse? I'll just say this. I know there's been a lot of focus about this kind of thing online, and I'd like to mention it on the radio with Left versus Right. The seditious six, as many are calling them, the members of Congress who put this video together last weekend, I guess it was, saying, I just want to make it clear, if you're in the military, you shouldn't follow any illegal orders. Don't follow the illegal orders. Well, thanks, Alicia Slotkin and Mark Kelly, like as if these members of the military aren't aware that they're not supposed to machine gun a village in South Vietnam or something like that. I mean, obviously that's what the spirit of that kind of concept is aimed at, but that's them telling people they ought not trust the government. They ought not trust the trappings of power. They should actively look to resist against what is in place to this day, which is obviously the government of the United States. And that's a lot different than protest or taking issue with something. When you're saying that, in essence, the trappings of government are illegal or somehow so wrong that you have to tell the military to rise up against, there's not necessarily a direct correlation between that video and what happened on Wednesday, but it's part of the same pattern. It's part of the same idea where these members of Congress are so keen to blame Trump for basically anything that they'll stop at nothing, even if it's as irresponsible as, oh, these members of the military ought to be considered the enemy, ought to be considered a target, ought at the very least be looked at with suspicion.
You know, James, earlier in my life, I worked for the Queens District Attorney's Office. I worked under supervision. I didn't have a license to practice law in the state, but I did try criminal court cases, and I did take orders sometimes to not try a case for some reason that was beyond my understanding. And then there were other times when I, kind of objected to the order I was given, but I knew that I had to follow it even though I raised an objection. And I think that would be the same position that people who are in the military are in now. You can think whatever you want to think, but you're not in a democratic situation. You're in a situation that is run by 2 or 3 people, and your job is to obey their orders, or you will feel the effects of not doing so. And I'm wondering if those 6 individuals who came out with those statements and showed those videos last weekend would not be eligible to be investigated based on that conduct and the statements they made to the general public that, might pass the ear of others in the military. And now we start to have an insurrection from within.
Yeah. I mean, look, Alicia Slotkin, right? The woman who was part of this whole thing, she is former CIA. So she knows exactly what she's doing. If she tries to play dumb or play innocent and, I'm just telling people to follow the rules, please. Anybody with a brain knows that that's not what's going on here. And furthermore, to your point, Governor, it may rise to the level of illegality. And I know that Mark Kelly, who is former military, he is going to be looked at or is already talking to members of the Department of War, Department of Homeland Security, in terms of the potential blowback, in terms of, what they did and what they said. And it's part of this whole treasonous aim at dissent. And there's just so little in the way of actual policy differences or trying to come up with what you're actually positing versus what the other side wants to do. It doesn't have any of that. It's just this whole concept of thou shalt not listen to the person that's telling you what to do. And look, the concept of I'm not going to just blindly adhere to authority. I'm going to think for myself. I have a brain between my ears. That's American. That's certainly a Western advanced society way of thinking. But in the military and in certain aspects of business or a family, when it's your father and you're the son, or your mom and you're the daughter, whatever, it's not always just a democracy and a debate. There are certain orders that need to be carried out. Very
eloquently stated, James, and we'd like to hear more of your thoughts. We're going to pause for a break right here. We're on WABC, the left versus the right. James and I haven't had a reason to fight yet, so stick around. You might yet see it. We'll be right back.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back with James Flippin. I'm David Paterson. We are your companions between 3 and 4 o'clock here on WABC. And we're talking about the terrible, terrible event that occurred in Washington, D.C., and also related incidents around the country. And James, I don't think you got a chance to totally finish what you were saying. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just Governor Paterson. Thanks for getting back in here and the chance to kind of expound on that, because in essence,
we've got the staff looking for boxing gloves, so we'll get back to you in a moment.
I'm taping my wrists. The gloves themselves, we might go bare knuckle. I mean, that remains to be seen. But no, the whole idea of holding power to accountability and people from the outside looking in saying, I want to use my free speech rights and my right to say, I'm not so sure about this immigration policy enforcement, or, National Guard members being used to fight against crime. Not sure how that sits with me. And people can have those discussions, and people can write those think pieces, and people can do the podcasts and do the radio shows, and it's all good. But the concept of trying to tell members of the military that they need to rebuke authority or look for an opportunity to not listen to their commanding officer is just wrong and is just entirely inappropriate, and is the kind of thing that sitting members of Congress doing that leads to what happened on Wednesday. And I'm not trying to draw the entire straight line between the two, but I will say this. The seditious six continuously are the type of people that have blood on their hands when it comes to this thing. Because for somebody to say, someone's doing wrong by putting resources behind policing crime, or someone's doing wrong by enforcing the immigration laws that we have, well, guess what? As a member of Congress, you can actually go ahead and make a law about that. You can drive the legislation the direction that you think is right. So if you want to do away with citizenship laws, which maybe Alicia Slotkin and Mark Kelly are all about, sounds like they probably would be, you can go ahead and make that law, guys, and then you can answer to your constituents and answer at the ballot box. And if you want to say that there's no way you can deploy National Guard members to the various cities of the United States, then go ahead and make that law. But for you to make that video on social media saying, oh, thou shalt not listen to what your commanding officer, you're traitors. You're treasonous, and you're just sowing the seeds of dissension. That's what they're doing. And sadly, you've got a 24-year-old fighting for his life and a 20-year-old who's going to an early grave because of that kind of crap. And
James, I think it really bears mentioning that those people, the reason it's so tragic, what happened to those two National Guards service people, is the fact that they signed up for it. They knew that this could possibly happen to them, and they still signed up for it to protect the country. But the country that they are protecting is now saying to their colleagues that you don't have to listen to these commands. And I think that's the beginning of a real, you will not have an effective military unless you have a true sense of obeying those who are in charge.
Right. And that's as someone like myself who has no connection to the military, no training, no aspect of the military, but I understand the way the chain of command works. I understand that in any organization, if you have no authority, if you have no one who's able to kind of say this is where the buck stops, then it's anarchy. And we're seeing that more and more, Governor, from the political left in the aims, in what they aim to achieve. So like this fight between federal law and the state constituency, right? Like what's the bigger authority? Is it the federal law or the individual states and their state constitutions? The governor of Oregon, I think I just saw, was saying, oh, we're going to arrest federal agents if they're enforcing the immigration laws here in Oregon. Zohran Mamdani has kind of sounded the similar tone where he says, well, I think of New York City as an international city and not necessarily. What are we talking about here? This is more or less people trying to say that their state or city state is somehow, aside from the United States of America, an extra jurisdiction. And that's obviously not true. Second of all, it's again on the line of treason or civil war. It's not how it's done. And the inability to actually formulate an effective argument or try to say this is why we don't agree with this policy, it just leads to this type of infraction where you're saying, well, then we're just going to take our ball and go home.
Well, James, we've been through 25 minutes of this show, and you finally mentioned the name Zoran Mamdani. And what I want to say is, after the election, he did say some things that were kind of conciliatory. That's what people do when they win and that kind of thing. But then, or I'm asking you this question, how much more foresighted would it have been if Mayor-elect Mamdani had gone to the places where there was violence in the Jewish community, people badly injured, people who are trying to pray getting injured, and he can't show up and say something positive about what the city is going to do to reinforce the safety around, all religious institutions and also where they're housed.
Well, look, I think so far the Zoran Mamdani administration, right, it hasn't started yet. It is waiting for January 1st to officially get underway. But they say they've raised all this money for the transition team. All these people want to come work for his team. There's a lot of momentum behind a Zoran Mamdani. But this event on November 19th, so it was 10 days ago, what you're referring to, Governor Paterson,
right,
at the Park East Synagogue on the Upper East Side, was nothing short of a disgrace. Again, the problem that we have, I think, in this country right now is one that has probably plagued a lot of societies and a lot of unfair situations in the past. It's rules for me, but not for thee. Or it's certain things that do apply, provided other things apply. So, for example, it's okay to be racist as long as you're being racist against a white person. It's okay to be a hateful bigot as long as the person you're being a hateful bigot toward is Jewish. And the protesting and making yourself heard about Palestine or Israel or whatever, that's fine. But you can't get in the way of people who just want to practice their right to free religion. You can't intimidate and harass people on the streets of New York City while doing so. And Mamdani, not only did he have a failure to properly rebuke that whole situation, but where was he to be seen in the days after? Where was he in terms of going to the scene and talking very publicly and saying, we can't be doing this kind of stuff. We're a month away from me getting in office here, and this isn't going to be tolerated when I'm around, because the Mamdani team has to know that there's a high level of concern from Jewish New Yorkers in terms of this whole anti-Semitic rise. And they addressed it during the campaign. They had to talk about it during the debates. So they know that it's out there. The inability or unwillingness to do anything about it now, right after this event at the synagogue on the Upper East Side, goes to show you that Mamdani doesn't really actually care about that issue. He doesn't actually really care about the emotions or feelings of the Jewish New Yorkers. He really only sticks by his whole idea, which is, I'm not going to condemn the term globalize the Intifada. That means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
James, I was being interviewed. It was some years ago. It was certainly before when I became governor. And this thought rolled out of my mind and came across my tongue. And what I said to the interviewer was, what this country needs right now is a white Martin Luther King. In other words, a person who really respects the values and the right to practice their religion, that does not appreciate or want to allow for any type of discrimination, and also an understanding that as a country, when we take a position every 4 years in a quadrennial referendum on election and presumably policy, that individual could hopefully start to pull people together in our society right now who are otherwise lost. And I think that's why, in many ways, they are turning to socialism. They're turning to attacks on the Jewish community. They're turning to failure to appreciate the leadership in government and that kind of thing, and which is why I think as a society we're struggling right now.
Well, it's really well said, and I think that the point is an interesting one. a white Martin Luther King, or maybe just the concept of someone who is part of the group. What really is fascinating about that concept, Governor Paterson, to me, is that Martin Luther King Jr. in the 60s during the civil rights movement, he was a part of the group that was so at the epicenter of all the debate and change, but he was also part of the sort of aggrieved group, right? Like the group that was being mistreated and was sort of coming out of that period of the more bigoted, kind of ignorant mindset causing them to be victims. And he was the one who said, it's time to turn the other cheek. He was the one who said, no, you really don't want to perpetuate this cycle of violence because it's not going to do anything for anybody, not the least of which us. And the ability for somebody in the, say, white community, Christian community, someone who's apart from a lot of this so-called woke stuff, to say in a very forceful way, you know what? We're going to continue to lead from the front and say, we reject this kind of violent dissension, treason, while also lifting up the concept of what it is to be an American and push forward for something in the realm of progress or in the vein of progress. There's a lot to be said for that, because too often we're devolving into this side versus that side and the basic argument over, whether or not you should be enforcing this law or that law. It's politics, right? It's the kind of stuff that we know well, but there's not enough leadership. And I agree with you on that. I think that there's not enough individual people who want to sort of think for themselves and say, whoa, it doesn't have to be this way. Like we don't have to accept foreign nationals coming into our country. We put them up in a house somewhere. We brought them into the country. We're told through reports by the CIA, which, okay, fine. I guess we're supposed to just take that at face value, that this guy worked for the U.S. Army against the Taliban. I have no idea. I certainly wasn't there. But he made his way into the country here. And he's got his long beard and his Allahu Akbar, and he blew away some 20-year-old American woman on Thanksgiving. And in essence, I guess we're just supposed to take that.
And right after he was granted asylum 3 months ago. So
which again, I don't even understand. I don't understand how that works either. I mean, now you have President Trump saying we're going to do something about this issue of immigration, and I have a feeling that sometimes this is where the left and the right can still, like, for example, right, Governor Paterson, you're a more left of center, but kind of conservative Democrat these days.
For a minute, James. We are going to hear from our advertisers who allow you and I to be on the show. And as soon as they are done, we'll be back, because that's a very thoughtful element to discuss right after these important messages. David Paterson and James Flippin on the left versus the right. You're at WABC 77 in New York.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the left versus the right. And we're going to hear from my colleague and co-host, James Flippin. One thing I wanted to say, James, that was interesting about Martin Luther King, he knew when to strike and when not to. So particularly, issues, that were existing at that time, in addition to segregation and unfair treatment, which was what he was fighting against. He also knew that he couldn't take on all the battles. And because of that, he was attacked himself from the left viciously by black activist groups and socialist groups and all kinds of people. The socialists were really trying to wreck his whole operation at one point, and he had to get rid of a few people to sustain his leadership. But I think your point is well taken about his ability to read not just what was going on around him, but what was going on around other people.
But, in some ways, Governor Paterson, I guess history kind of repeats itself because now, and we've had a lot of bones to pick up until this point in the program. And yet we started at the front end saying it's Thanksgiving, start of the holiday season. I don't want to be all negative all the time. So maybe a guy like Zohran Mamdani can thread that needle a little bit and be one of those guys who can pick his battles and say, I do want to fight for this particular policy point, but I don't necessarily need to right now on this one. We've already seen where Jessica Tisch is going to stay on as NYPD commissioner, which probably the Democratic Socialists of America are not so happy about. I've heard some stuff behind the scenes that suggests maybe they don't care that much about getting rid of Jessica Tisch because they have other fish to fry, so to speak. But the concept that we were talking about at the front end when we made that last break, immigration, so long as it's legal immigration, is something that I think conservative Democrats feel, and for the most part, I think as like a maybe on that one issue, being a sort of left-leaning conservative, felt the same way, right? Like, okay, legal immigration is fine.
Right.
But now I find myself just wondering if there's aspects of that I don't necessarily still agree with, because you see in Somalia, or rather in Minneapolis, this large Somalian group of immigrants who came in, faked autism rates, got all this money out of the government, sent it back to Somalia. We know about the issues with corruption and piracy in that particular country. Afghanistan, the infighting and the violence that's been reality there for so many years. Now you've got this 29-year-old guy who's there was just somebody down in Dallas, Fort Worth, Governor Paterson, who was arrested for allegedly building a bomb and charged with terrorism. I don't know if you saw that. I think that just came out today. So, like, do we really need immigration? Like, AI is changing everything. Job market, harder and harder to get a job these days. America First would say that there's a lot of ways we can train the existing American population to do a lot of the stuff we need. I've said a lot. I'll give the ball back to you. I don't want to totally dominate the discussion and say I just feel immigration is a fascinating thing. And now President Trump has said we're going to stop all third world immigration. He's tried to talk about raising the barrier to entry, the $1 million green card or gold card or whatever it is. And they're reviewing green card policies now. So where are you at with all that in terms of how I encapsulated it?
Well, I think we're in an international world. We are one country who operates internationally all the time. So it will be difficult. Now, I think that if we continue to have some of these situations as you so properly described, we're going to have to change something. I do think maybe we'll have to raise the bar on what it takes to become an immigrant based on what we've seen where people have come here and done exactly the opposite of the oath that they swore to when they became citizens of the United States. So while I think it would be hard to achieve, I think you make a very good point. And remember that, James, because I've never said that you've done that before.
No, I'm thank you for reminding me to make a note in my journal that on November 29th, 3:36, Governor Paterson said I make it. Good. So I have that note there. No, but it's true. I mean, the whole thing, there's always a level of nuance with any policy. Most of the time, you're not going to say, oh, never this or never that, but there's some level of moderation or limit to it. And the immigration debate is so often couched in this, oh, well, we wouldn't be here if not for immigrants, or your grandparents were immigrants, or you did this and you did that. Yeah, but, history is not so static. Things are always constantly evolving and changing. And maybe in certain contexts or in certain regions or whatever, there is still a lot of virtue and upside in immigration. And clearly you're absolutely right, Governor Paterson. You're not going to completely slam the door because that's just not the way the world works. But I do think that it's not enough to just say, all right, we've been good about closing down the border crossings. Trump has put that whole thing out there that not only are we actually trying to close the border, but you should be aware of that. Don't just come here thinking that it's going to be a free ride. that makes a difference over time. But the ongoing deportation efforts, which have been receiving so much coverage in the media as like a negative thing, are actually a really good thing. And it should be okay to say that out loud. It should be okay to say we don't want all these extraneous aspects of immigration changing everything for this country, changing the job market, changing our schools, changing our cities, leading to the Islamification of the Midwest. No, we don't want that. That's not something that we have an interest in. And I think that it's okay to say that out loud, and it's not xenophobic. There's nothing wrong with it. The ability to speak your mind obviously is well founded on both sides, both the people getting arrested downtown right now because they're protesting the ICE facility, and the people on the airwaves saying, yeah, we like the fact that people are getting deported if they're not here legally, or they haven't been here for a long time, or whatever it may be. You know,
James, there was a guest on Steve Moore's More Money show from 2 to 3, and I was sitting there, just listening, and this gentleman who apparently is very well known, but at no point did I hear them mention his name. But apparently he was here in the city, and a taxi driver who was from Somalia recognized him, said he's been here. He's been a citizen for 17 years. He likes driving the taxi, and he's, telling this gentleman all about it. And then right as they get to the place where he stopped and got off, and he said he's going to remember this for the rest of his life, the Somalian taxi driver said the one thing that Americans should always know is that these people from other countries all would really wish to live in America. And he said he'll never forget that. He'll never forget the driver. And I think that's what is makes it so difficult to have immigration that works effectively, because you really can't weed out the individuals who are coming here to make a new life from the individuals who are coming here to try to take lives.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who's to say that this guy, the 29-year-old, I can't even remember his name, Rock Wanall or whatever the heck his name is, the guy who is a murderous monster who took the life of Sarah Beckstrom down in D.C., who's to say that he didn't have this whole idea baked up years ago? And what?
Can you imagine?
He threw in a couple shifts as a translator or something, and then he figured he'd get here to the United States, and then he did what he did.
And James, can you imagine? This man was married. He had 5 kids. So he destroyed his own family in addition to what he did to the National Guards people that he shot. What is this guy thinking about now? Apparently, they did say that he had a history of mental problems. I know a lot of people who have a history of mental problems, and they seem to be able to, treat other people in society respectfully. And I just found that to be kind of interesting that he didn't care, what would happen to his family after this mission, which really, generally speaking, was a suicide mission.
Right. And I mean, that's the problem that we find ourselves facing right now as a society, Governor Paterson. And you kind of drew the distinction with that taxi driver who is telling the story of how happy he is and knowing others who would be happy to be here in the United States. And it's an uplifting story in the sense that that's what you would like to believe most of the immigrants coming to the West are like. And I certainly hope that that's true. But the weird thing that we are in, this weird pocket we're in as a society, and it's kind of the same with the whole woke thing, right? Like for the longest time after the George Floyd situation, you weren't allowed to say anything about how he was probably high on drugs when it happened, and the past instances that he had a burglary and holding a gun to a woman's stomach and all this kind of stuff. Say that because St. Floyd, thou shalt not besmirch his name. With regards to what we're getting into right now, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, being very far right of center, even being very far left of center as a socialist or as a communist, those positions, those ways of life, if you want to call them that, you're allowed to criticize them in society. You can, right? Like you could say socialism stinks. I hate socialism. I think communism's bad. Mamdani's bad because of it. You can say Trump is bad. Oh, he's a fascist. He's this, he's this. You can speak poorly of the Jewish religion and suggest that they're all controlling the media and greedy. And you can say that Christians are hateful and want to kill gays and stone women and all this kind of stuff. You can say all this stuff. The one thing you cannot do is properly speak to truth, the reality of the Islamic experience. Can't do it. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to actually say how nuts it is that we welcomed this guy into the country who literally drove across the entire nation from Washington, screamed out Allahu Akbar and killed this woman in cold blood and tried to do it to 24-year-old Andrew Wolf. You're not allowed to criticize that, even though that's obviously what is happening here. Obviously, we're seeing all this awful Islamic violence across the entire world. You're not allowed to actually criticize the policy or the religion and the whole aspect of the Quran saying you're supposed to do this stuff. You're not allowed to. It's the weird. It's like we live in the Twilight Zone. It really is. That's the way I see it. And until we break free of that and have a frank, honest discussion about the dangers associated with Islam, we're not going to get anywhere. Period. So, I mean, we can continue to spin our wheels and say, oh, the guy had mental health problems, or why would he do that to his children? Or, oh, doesn't he care about his wife? Probably not, because he figures that he's getting into heaven and the salvation is his because he committed jihad. And that's it. It's really simple for him.
It's really damning to hear the way you just described it, because that's what it seems to be where we're headed.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, on the Upper East Side, when they're harassing Jewish people outside of the synagogue, it's all good.
Yeah.
Didn't you get the memo? They're Muslim. Right. They're allowed to do that.
James, I just got a memo that we've got to go to a commercial break. We're here on the left versus the right. James Flippin just out of control today. He is playing way above the rim. And his colleague, yours truly, David Paterson, we're here on the left versus the right. We'll be back right after these important commercial messages.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on the left versus the right. David Paterson with James Flippin. James, I have goosebumps right now. Would you care to guess why I'm having goosebumps?
I think it's very possible that you have goosebumps right now because the voice of the Yankees has made his way into the studio, and you're thinking about the many, many times you've heard him call out the fact that the Yankees won, or the A-bomb from A-Rod, or, burn, baby, burn, or, any of those.
All of that stuff. And before he was the Yankees announcer, he had been the announcer for the Atlanta Hawks basketball team.
That's right.
And before that, he was a talk show radio host right here in New York. And I listened to him. I'm a big sports fan. And I have met him twice before, but when he just walked through the door, and I have his notes here, but I guess he knows I can't read them. So we will move on and finish out this show with exactly what I think we need right now is for our political leaders to stand more firm. What you were talking about in terms of the oath that many people of the Islamic faith take, and then how they act on it and that kind of thing. I think people are afraid to speak out because you're not being fair. They have a right to free speech. But the problem is too many people are acting on that free speech.
And you know what else, Governor Paterson? I think that there's a crossover, a little bit of a nexus between this concept of sort of internalized self-loathing, or maybe that guilt that some people feel when there's a level of success that's attained. So the United States of America is a amazing success story, one that is rooted in both ancient and modern philosophies, You're going back to the Greek, you're going back to the Romans, you're going back to the battlefield of 1776. And even though Ken Burns will tell you it's all about just stealing Native American cultures, it's actually anything but. So you're trying to adhere to a realized standard, and you're upholding this United States of America as something special and something precious and something dear. And that concept is not spoken about enough in terms of immigration. You're absolutely right about that. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that if you want to come here to this country and be part of this society, we want you to still be in lockstep with the society. We want you to be thinking the same way that we are, which is that it's about private property rights. No, exactly. And so for the longest time, the debate has been legal versus illegal immigration. And then we, about a half hour ago, we're trying to drive our way around. Well, how much do we even really want the legal versus maybe we need to slow it down or whatever? At the end of the day, if you're not talking about, I want to come here and assimilate and be part of Western society, and it doesn't mean that I eat the same food as you or dress the same way as you or listen to the same music or look the same way, that's not what it's about. It's about standards of behavior, standards of prioritization within a community and what we want to achieve, not causing a violent incursion on anyone else or their way of life. We should be able to talk about that. We should be lifting up this concept of, we want you to come here and be Americans. And they don't all look the same. They don't all sound the same, but we have a basic level of behavior and standards that we all hold to, and get with the program if you're trying to be here. That's really it. And there's this whole idea that it's not like compassionate to say that, and it's actually quite compassionate.
In the early stages of just, when we created a constitution, we set up a Bill of Rights and a whole lot of things. As time went on, it was really an understood and followed practice. There weren't that many people who were against the country when it was first formulated, but we did, start to have problems years later as there were more people and they had different points of view, and more people and different points of view is fine. But there has to be, as you just pointed out, kind of a sense of that these opinions and even these actions have to be taken within a certain spectrum. And that spectrum would be that you're not going to speak out against the existence of the country. You can speak out against laws that you might not like, but we're moving to an area where the very existence of the country is being challenged, and I think it makes a lot of people very frightened.
Yeah, and with good reason. I mean, I think that if you look at our history, Governor Paterson, the whole idea of like slavery, right? Chattel slavery, or women not being able to vote, or black people not being able to vote, or those are all against the ideal. The ideal that was established with the early part of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, which actually is not an official document, but still kind of like our spirit animal, so to speak. It's a sticky issue to say people ought to live in bondage just to be employment machines, or that these people cannot participate in the Constitution and the voting, even though they're adults. That actually was not true to ourselves. So it created an internal conflict that had to be answered, that had to be solved. But all this stuff coming from the outside saying that actually, all this stuff you guys established, we don't really like it because, we're from the Middle East or Africa, or, you understand, right? Like, we don't really dig all this stuff. We want to get all your money, but we don't want to follow all the structures that you guys have. No, that doesn't work. And it's never going to work. And until we stand up and say no, in an opposite way of the internal revolution that came as a result of slavery and lack of voting rights and suffrage and all that. This is now, to your point, coming from the outside in, and we here inside the tent need to kick it all out. Just kick it out. Just take it out. Take it out like the trash. That's what has to happen.
And James, can you name any figures that are, well known in society right now who are avowing the same thing that you just expressed? There just don't seem to be that many.
Yeah, well, I think that the weird way that the whole issue, all the issues have been so like is balkanized the right word? Or, you've got all these different things that you have to have the right take on in order to actually be listened to. So, whatever. Maybe a guy like Tucker Carlson is not everybody's cup of tea, because these days he's striking an almost very anti-Israel tone that makes some people uneasy. And, a guy like Alex Jones, for example, has got all the stuff with Sandy Hook, and people don't really know what was that all about. And there's enduring questions about that. And he got sued, and he's been deplatformed, and yet he's been very consistent in saying, we need to. So there are people out there that do it, but do they do it while also effectively allowing oxygen around the issue, or for there to be debate, or for there to be a level of discourse maybe on all this stuff, while really standing firm on Western society is good, Western society is virtuous, and we need to protect it at all costs. Well, sometimes I think there's an unwillingness to be really, really black and white on some of this stuff, even though some of the issues really call for it.
Well, I think we would both agree that the owner-operator of this station, John Catsimatidis, talks about this all the time, and he started to go on other mediums and talk about it, and I hope that will fuel the thoughts of others who hear what he has to say about common sense and what he has to say about what's fair and what's not fair. And it's been obviously very effective for him. Nielsen Ratings now rates WABC #1 in the country. Did you know that, James? You're on the #1 radio station in the country.
Well, you know what, Governor? On Thursday, I think it was, I was on with John in the morning, Thanksgiving morning. We were filling in for Sid, and I was telling him about, the concept of being thankful and being grateful and how I felt. And, I grew up listening to this station, and whether it was in the backseat of my parents' car, or even then years later when I was going to broadcast school and delivering pizza on the side, I remember very well.
You listened to the station when it was a music station.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Going back far enough. That actually does predate me. Of course, that slightly does predate me. But no, the days of listening to Rush Limbaugh and even Sean Hannity when he was still on the station before he switched over, and Mark Levin and, Don Imus. And, this is all such a strong legacy of the kind of people that I think stood strong on a lot of the basic issues that we're talking about, whether it's just common sense or the American Western way of life being worth standing up for and defending. It's all part of it. It's all part of it. And I think that it's really a special treat to be able to do it, alongside somebody like you, Governor Paterson, who has seen so much of the way the country's changed since the 60s, and how some of that was good, some of it was bad, and it's still happening.
Thank you for joining us. They're playing the theme song right now. We're going off the air. James, thanks so much for joining us. You're on WABC.
I'm shadowboxing.
Outside of boxing, WABC 77 on your radio dial. John Sterling is coming up, and all I can say about this week's version of the left versus the right is, it is high, it is far, it is gone.
And get us Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, please.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.